Thank you so much for joining us we're the Ehlers-Danlos support group. We have Jennifer Warner here, who has a long career in medical billing, and she's here to answer our questions. So if anybody has questions, we can, if you're joining us virtually, we can do that. We can pass those on for you.
You want me to tell a little bit about myself?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you so much. So, she said, my name is Jennifer, and I've been in the medical field. I did 2 years of trade school training, and after that trade school training, I stayed in the field for 32 years, and I've been in it ever since. Basically, I've learned quite a bit about the different types of insurances, the plans, the benefits, and the pros and the cons with it. What people don't understand a lot of times, people don't realize that if they don't look at their benefits in the breakdown, and if they don't call and ask questions, then something they think is covered isn't necessarily covered. Well, you can call a facility and you can say, do you take Aetna or do you take Cigna or another insurance? And they'll tell you yes, but there's called umbrellas, and it's an umbrella for a reason, because there could be multiple different types of insurance plans. While the facility may take that insurance, they may not take your specific insurance. So it's very important that most people realize that they got to look through the website or through their booklets, or even make phone calls to their insurance plans to see if in fact that particular office takes your specific insurance plan. These are things that most people don't think about. They just hear, hey, take my plan. And even offices are guilty of not doing the detailed work and looking to see if that specific plan. So I'll give you an example. I had a patient the other day that came in and they had Cigna. And we do take Cigna at the facility in which I work. And so the patient came in, we looked at the benefits, and said, yes, we take Cigna. But what we failed to do is look at the details. And that Cigna plan was an HMO plan. And that particular patient apparently lived in a different city besides Jacksonville. And that's the city, and there was a doctor in that city in which that patient went to. That was their assigned PCP provider. So when they came here to where I work, they did not change to that new facility. And we did not notice that that particular Cigna plan, which is called EPO HMO, it's not a network with our facility. We take different types of Cigna. So we are contracted, but not with his specific plan. So although his insurance processed that claim and they allowed it, but what ended up happening is it was allowed to the patient and the insurance didn't pay the allowed amount. So they permitted the visit and they said, we'll let you get a contractual discount, but we as a company are not going to pay it. We're actually responsible for it. So there's where the small details of making sure the specific plan that you have is accepted at that facility.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so those are some details, but if you have questions, I will do my best to answer them. A lot of times too, things are driven by diagnosis. A lot of people aren't aware of that you can go and have an EM code, but if your diagnosis isn't a diagnosis that your insurance covers, you have another issue. So it's really important. I can put it this way. You have to be your own advocate, because as much as your providers that you go to are very knowledgeable, we don't know every little detail. And so a lot of times when I say be your own advocate, find out what your diagnoses are and then make a list of those. And then when you go to your own website, you can literally look these things up. You can Google them. You can see if that's covered by your insurance by looking at your benefits. You can call and say, I'm having this visit with this diagnosis. Is it a covered procedure on the same visit? And they'll tell you, they have to tell you, your insurance has to tell you yes or no. Most times patients and even providers don't know the specific questions to ask. So you have to be basically break it down and then ask the question. And when you are very specific in your question, they actually have to ask you or answer your question. And if they don't have an answer, then you can say, can you look that up and find out for me? Or tell me where in my benefits booklet or where on the website can I find out this information? And they should be able to do something directly.
If you want to check to see on TikTok if we've got some.
What is your opinion on United Healthcare?
So I'm going to be specific, as a Medicare Advantage plan, or as a commercial plan, or as a Medicaid plan, because there are 3 different plans.
Yeah,
Medicare Advantage is those people who qualify for Medicare, but they choose the Advantage plan.
yep,
The commercial plan is when you're employed, or your spouse is employed, or your parents, and you get to be under their benefits. The United Healthcare Medicaid plan is those that are on some kind of disability or low income, and that's the community plan. So they're all very different, but in my honest opinion, United Healthcare is probably one of the better plans of all of the insurances. Their website is user friendly. Their reps for the most part are very helpful. And I went to a seminar actually 2 weeks ago for United Healthcare. They are very, very helpful as far as providers are concerned, because they have their seminars. We go to them, we learn, they give, as a matter of fact, this is the same booklet I used when I went to the seminar where I took multiple notes. When we submit claims to them, we have to do it a certain way, and they reject them, and then they tell us how we can be better at getting our claims paid when we do it a specific way. So they're very good about educating their providers. And so for my opinion is that's a very good company.
TRICARE.
TRICARE. TRICARE, there is TRICARE Prime, and then there is TRICARE for Life. TRICARE Prime and TRICARE for Life are very good. It is advocates that we have. So every insurance company has a direct contact that they're supposed to, especially when they're contracted with a facility. So if they're contracted with a facility, they have to provide us a direct link to one person that is a rep, that when we have issues with claims beyond us calling and working with them directly when on the phone or online or doing appeals, if we have an issue that becomes like more than just one patient, or sometimes it's isolated where we've done everything we can to get that claim paid, and we know that they're wrong and they have processed it wrong, we've done all of they asked us to do, then we say, okay, we've reached our limit, we can't get this paid. Now we go to that direct person and we say, we need you to look at this isolated case or this trend that's happening. And that direct contact is supposed to help us with those complications that we're just at an impasse and we're not getting the results that we know we should be. Sometimes it's harder to reach that person with TRICARE, in my experience. They get overwhelmed, and so sometimes we have to be patient with reaching them. And so, but they do answer us. So I think for me as a provider, we have to be a little bit more patient with some insurance companies when it comes to communication, but they're also very good. They're great as a secondary to Medicare or to any other health insurance. They usually will pick up anything that's remaining left over. So as a government plan, that is a very good plan. Thank you.
All right, any other questions, guys? All right, guys, you have any questions? Medical billing, insurance plans? TRICARE is good. Yes, yeah, TRICARE. I have a- go
I can
ahead.
give you some insight on something that most patients don't think about.
Yeah, give us the tips and tricks
So
for,
I'll give you a couple thoughts. So most times people, when I mention diagnosis, so if you have problems, say with your shoulder or your back or your knee or an ankle, and say you fall in your own home and it's just an injury that's not related to auto and it's not related to work comp, you just fell, even just walking down the street, and you fall and you hurt yourself, and you go to the doctor and they say, okay, she's got a sprained ankle. And your insurance company, regular health insurance company, they send you a questionnaire and they say, is this auto related? Don't ignore those. Is it work comp? Is it private property injury? Most people think, no, it's not. And so why am I getting this form? You're getting it because the diagnosis that's been listed suggests that you have an injury, which sometimes injury can be related to any one of those three. And if so, that means that typically your regular health insurance is going to think it might be auto related, work comp related, or private property where you may have reached out and hired an attorney, or you're using the other insurances. So even if you're not using it and it is not related to any of those that I mentioned, if you get a questionnaire, you need to fill it out and you need to turn it back in. If you don't, your insurance company gives you another letter and they're going to give you a second opportunity to answer. If you don't answer that and you ignore it, they're not obligated to pay your claim anymore. They can say they're going to give you approximately 6 months. The provider doesn't get paid, and we are going to wait. We're going to try to reach out to you. We're going to call you. We're going to leave you a message and say, we can't, because of HIPAA, we can't give you details on your phone unless you say to us, leave me a full message. Nobody else gets this. But most times we don't know. And if there's no HIPAA release, we're just going to call you, or we're going to send you a letter and say, please contact us. We need to talk to you. It's not about a bill yet. It's about, we need you to fill out that form. Because if we don't get paid, we're only going to hold your claim for so long. And if we try to contact you and you don't answer our calls or you don't fill out that form, we're transferring that bill to you. Now, from that point, you've got approximately 6 months to answer that. You might fill it out, but if you exceed the time frame in which your insurance allows you to fill it out, when you fill it out and turn it back in, they can deny that claim for timely, and then you still become responsible because you didn't do it in the time frame in which they want you to do it. So it's really important. Even if the answers are all no, fill it out, save yourself a copy, and turn it back into them. And the reason why I say save a copy is because when you send it in, sometimes those things get lost. And you may know you sent it in to the very address and envelope they gave you, but somehow it got lost. So if you keep that address in which you sent it to, you date when you sent it, I would say give it 2 weeks, do a phone call to your insurance company and ask them if they have it, because you sent it in. So this is where I say being proactive in your own insurance and your own benefits is really important, because the assumption sometimes can cause you more headaches than just making that initial phone call and say, did you get it? I turned it in. They say, no, you have a copy. Send that copy and make yourself another copy. Get the name of the person you spoke to that said, no, they don't have it. Get a reference number, save it, and then contact your provider and tell your provider, you filled out the form, you turned it in, here's the reference number. Because now we can be your advocate and we can fight for you and say, you got it. We spoke, your patient spoke to you and talked to you, and here's this information. So now we're going to fight for you so that they can pay that bill.
And what about like faxing stuff? That's what I tend to do. I have an internet, an e-fax, and so that I get some kind of message that says it's been received.
Faxes are great. If you
Is
can
that good
fax
for a
it
paper
or email
trail?
direct to someone,
Yeah.
yeah, actually, in all honesty, faxing and emailing is better because you have an instant response from a fax. You have an instant response from an email because you can see when it's read or received, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's your backup. Mailing it in, that I would prefer not to do. But
Yeah.
if that's what they give you, so then the suggestion would be if anywhere on that documentation it tells you how to fax it or how to email it, I would choose those two things
Mhm.
over mailing it, because they're, they're your backup. So yes, if you have that, I would suggest you do that. It's much better.
Thank you.
Question. So I have TRICARE for life,
Mhm.
and I found out that I reached out to TRICARE and said I have a complicated medical case with Ehlers-Danlos and all the comorbidities, and they assigned me a free advocate who I can communicate with through emails on stuff like, hey, this claim didn't go, like my genetic testing wasn't being covered. So I was able to now I have just one person. Do other insurance companies offer that as well, or is that just something TRICARE has?
Blue Cross Blue Shield, I don't know if you've ever seen Town Center. There's a building that's down in the Town Center and it's standing there, it says Blue Cross Blue Shield. They have on-site advocates. That's not a doctor's office. That literally is a place that they let people come to. So they're freestanding facilities, and when patients have bill issues, or they have to turn in a paper, or something's not getting paid, and they don't understand, and they've been communicating, you can go in there, you can get a representative, and once you get that person, they should be start to finish your person to contact. If you have, I know United Healthcare has this, I know Blue on their phone, you can call their phone numbers, and you can get a nurse, or you can get a person. If you call their regular phone numbers, you're going to get a person, but the next time you call, you're typically not going to get the same person. We typically, even as providers, don't always get the same person. Unless you have a really, really good representative on the phone and they're very proactive. I love my job. Let me give you my direct line, and then we're going to handle this together. It doesn't always happen, but United Healthcare is that I know for the providers end, I don't know if they do it on the patient end, is they'll say, hey, we want to audit this call and we want to do better at communications. Do you mind if we record and then ask you questions at the end? I always say yes. And the reason why I say yes is because when I talk to the representative, that representative is either knowledgeable or she's lacking knowledge. So because of my years experience, I'm very clear on the questions I will ask. I'll say, do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand what I want? And if they tell me they do, then their response to what I'm asking tells me if they know. So I'm gonna go one or two routes. I'm gonna say, you've been very helpful, but I need to speak to a supervisor because I don't think you understand my question. And then I go above up. And then if I can't get a supervisor, or I can't get them to understand my question and to process it, because usually I'm one that gets my ducks in a row. I want to know what your policy is. I want to know when it was dated, when you revised it, what diagnosis code goes with that procedure, and what all the guidelines are. We follow this. This should be paid. And if I can't get them to resolve it by saying yes, now at the end, you're going to ask me questions. I'm going to leave you my name. I'm going to leave you my phone number, and you already see the recording. And so now you're going to call me back, and I'm going to get that problem resolved. And then they're going to educate their people. So if they do that with you and they say, well, would you like to leave a message on this, how this representative did? It's really important. It's helpful for you because if you're struggling, then they're going to listen to that recording. They're going to call you back and they're going to say, let me help and answer your question now. And now that's going to become an educational thing for them when they train the people.
Good to know.
We process something similar, not as concise, and it's something good. Someone is working a case best. Sad that we have to fight to get claims paid, but the name of the game is they don't want to pay. Any other questions, guys? Medicare supplements versus Medicaid. Okay, here we go. Medicare supplements versus Medicare replacement products. Which are you going to get? What is that? You know what I mean?
Okay, so supplemental, Medicare supplemental If I'm correcting the question, if I'm understanding the question correctly. So that means that you chose Medicare and you want a supplemental plan. Supplemental plan, so Medicare pays 80% of the allowed amount, not the billed amount. They pay 80% of the contractual allowed amount. So that means there's 20% of the contractual allowed amount that's remaining. So that means you as the patient are responsible for that 20%. But if you purchase AARP supplemental or Blue Cross supplemental or TRICARE is always, if there's other insurance, TRICARE is always the secondary to the other insurance. So in that case, that secondary typically picks up that 20% from Medicare. The only time it does not is that unless you buy a premium plan, supplemental plan, they typically do not pick up your deductible. TRICARE will pick up the deductible from Medicare, but most other insurance plans, unless they're a premium plan, they typically will let you be responsible for the deductible. And then when you get to your co-insurance, that 20%, they will pick that up. Most supplemental plans, if Medicare doesn't pay for it, they do not pay for it as well. So what you need to be aware with Medicare is very much of a diagnosis driven. So you can have a procedure, but if your diagnosis is not covered, they're called LCDs and NCDs. So LCD is local coverage determination. NCDs, national coverage determination. You literally can go on, I think I wrote it down. I'm gonna give you a website and you can look this stuff up yourself for Medicare to see what's covered and not covered. Let's see. Okay. So if you look up www.medicare.fcso.com/, that'll take you to a Medicare website for Jacksonville, Florida, or just Florida, right? And in there, you can look up the fee schedule. In there, you can look up the procedure, and it'll tell you articles. So there's an area when you look up a procedure. So you're going to type in, you're going to look on the right side or the left side. It has this whole list of things you can choose from. So if you want to know if your procedure and diagnosis are covered, you're going to go look up LCD. And then under LCD, you're going to look up your procedure. When you look up that procedure, it's going to give you a list of diagnoses that are covered. So you can literally ask your doctor, what are my diagnoses? And if you have a procedure coming up, you can look on that list to see if it's covered. If it's not on that list, that means you're going to be responsible for it, or Medicare will not pay it. So your providers are then going to ask you to sign a waiver. That waiver is called an ABN. So basically what they're telling you at that point is your diagnosis may or may not be covered. And because it may or not be covered, we need you to sign a waiver. And on that waiver, you're basically saying, if my insurance doesn't cover this diagnosis that I have, then I'm going to take the responsibility to pay the contractual allowed of that procedure. So there's where that website, if you know how to surf websites, that's a good website. It's very educational for you to look up. When you look that up, you want to do it under, so it'll say Florida, it'll say A or B. You want to look up B if you're doing it in the doctor's office. And Florida's region for this area in Jacksonville, when you look it up, there's different numbers. You're going to do Florida 99. That number will pop up. It'll ask you different locations, but you'll want to look up Florida 99. And that's the benefits and guidelines for this area in Jacksonville.
Someone asked about Aetna coverage, but I was asking her what she has it under, is it a Medicare or regular, but I haven't heard yet.
And it is a good plan.
Okay.
I do like it. I think it has, again, the same thing. It has a lot of good benefits. It offers a lot of things. And it's, Aetna utilizes well, Aetna and Blue Cross utilize a website called Availity. I don't think that that's the same one that they do for the patients. But Availity actually gives, or Aetna website, Blue Cross's website, you can use your search bars, and then you can look up a lot of things in there as well. So it's pretty friendly. Google is actually a very good friend of yours. If you're not using it, you can actually say, for example, Blue Cross Blue Shield Florida guidelines. I choose not to use policy because guidelines gives you a little bit more detail than if you use the word policy. So you want to say Blue Cross Blue Shield's guideline for, and you can enter a diagnosis, you can enter a procedure, and a lot of times it'll give you different links, and then that'll lead you to their policies and procedures, and it'll break it down for you. So that's a good way to find out a lot of things that you want to know if it's covered or not.
I think Keelan says that their Aetna Medicare has been great and they have most chronic illnesses. Share that experience.
I had a question about Medicare, some changes that they've had in the last year or for this year. My husband and I both we get home care, and they're putting us on some kind of certain kind of, it's almost like an HMO within Medicare, where you have a provider who then, I don't know exactly what it's called, some newer thing, which has made it a little more difficult, like to get the DME coverage. But I wish I remembered what it was called. Something new with Medicare that they're trying to.
Do you have straight Medicare?
Yep.
Okay. Medicare is really good, but no, again, I don't share where I work because I do work for the company, but I don't want to mislead anybody. And then if I share them what that becomes is, then I'm a representative of them, so I have to be really careful. So this is my personal opinion. You have straight Medicare, and then you have the Advantage plans. A lot of times what Medicare doesn't cover, your Advantage plans actually give you more benefits, and the reason, and sometimes it's actually cheaper for you to pay your premiums. And so if you're eligible for Medicare, and then you have straight Medicare, they have very strict guidelines. The other Advantage plans have the same guidelines, but because they want you to utilize them, and Medicare actually would prefer that you use them, in all honesty, so they offer more benefits. So Blue Cross offers 24 hours to you to talk to a nurse, and then they'll advise you. United Healthcare, they offer a lot of extra benefits. So like you can go to the pharmacy, you can go to the grocery store, and you actually get more, you can get groceries and medication, over-the-counter medications that are at a discount on a card that they give you. In addition to you getting your benefits, you have like money sitting there for you to buy stuff. I have in-laws that 2 or 3 years ago, they were on straight Medicare, and they said, my doctor's not going to take that particular Medicare. They don't want to do Medicare. They want to change over. What do I do? And so they said, well, I got a new booklet, and it's got all these different plans. And because I didn't want to make the decision for them, I said, I need you to go through your book. You open it. It's that book for Medicare is this thick.
When they
So
mail it to
the best
you.
thing you can do is
I go on the
yellow
website.
go through, highlight all the things, and then go look at your insurances, the Advantage plan. I knew what I wanted them to choose, but I also knew that I had, I can't tell you what to choose for yourself. I can advise you from my own opinion, but their premiums for straight Medicare, once they changed over to the United Healthcare plan that they chose, there was a $500 a month savings in what they changed over to, and they had more benefits, and they got a lot more free stuff. And they had a direct linked phone number that they could call the nurse 24 hours and ask them questions. And that a nurse advised them whether or not they needed to go to the doctor, or if they could buy something over the counter.
Okay. The reason we have straight traditional Medicare is because we have we're a long-term care waiver with Medicaid, so Medicaid picks up all our other stuff.
Yeah.
And they provide all our transportation, they do everything else, so.
Mhm.
Other than they don't do vision, I think, but no, they do actually, I got my glasses through them.
Yeah,
So that's why we don't have an advantage right now.
So if you're under 64 years old, then if you have medical conditions, the first 2 years, if you have health insurance, the first 2 years, Medicare is going to be your secondary to your health insurance. Once you're 2 years, if you're still on disability, Medicare becomes your primary. So there's a 2-year
Yeah,
span,
mine's
and then after that,
primary.
they become primary. And then if you qualify for a Medicaid supplemental to kick in afterwards, then those can be done. I think United Healthcare is the only one that you can, if you have Medicare and Medicaid, you can actually do what's called a dual plan,
Mhm.
and you can choose both. And so both Medicare and Medicaid will cover you through United Healthcare. So you're just converting everything from Medicare and Medicaid to the advantage for both Medicaid and Medicare.
Yep.
If you have,
Seen
say for
that.
instance, if you have TRICARE for life is your prime,
Mhm.
and say you're filing for disability and then you get your disability, the first 2 years TRICARE will still be your prime and then it flips.
I think TRICARE is the only one that is different. Because TRICARE,
They're government.
TRICARE, if you
one.
just have TRICARE by yourself, then TRICARE is your primary because you have no other insurance. But anytime you have any other insurance, TRICARE is always the secondary.
So just with that, yeah, and you won't qualify with, when you go on, when you're accepted into disability, you have to wait 2 years, well, it's from when you first applied,
Mhm.
before you can even get Medicare.
Okay, yeah.
So like if you get disability right away, which most people don't, but some people do, if you have one of those conditions that qualify you quickly, and, but then your Medicare would be available
Okay.
in 2 years from your application.
Okay.
We've got somebody, our friend Jamie, she said, can you talk about getting reimbursed for out-of-network coverage using super bills? Because that's something that those of us sometimes have to go to specialists that are not in network.
So if you're using a super bill, then that provider has to be okay with using the super bill. So what they would do is they would break down the cost of everything. And so typically then what you would do is that provider's probably asking you to pay that cost. And you take that super bill and you need to make a copy for yourself, and then you're going to fax, email, or mail it into your insurance company. Your insurance company then should be paying you directly because you paid the provider of services. So that's typically how it works. Super bills aren't very popular anymore, so I don't have like this great knowledge of it. I just know that's typically the plan. Most places don't do the super bills anymore.
I know there's a few providers like Dr. Atwell. I think he
Oh, there's
does
quite a few,
that.
so-
Yeah.
In Florida, just kind of EDS related, I've super billed TRICARE for Dr. Atwell. He was half covered, but then Dr. Trevino, they didn't supplement any of that. And then Mayo Clinic for TRICARE for me, because I haven't my
They
deductible,
use super-
is covered. They didn't super bill, they covered all of it.
Okay.
They're covering all right
Yeah,
now.
because I worked there, I don't work there anymore, but I worked there 10 years. And they didn't do super bills when I had worked there.
And then Dr. Herbst in Arizona, where I got my Derkins diagnosis, was a super bill and TRICARE didn't have it. So it's, honestly, I'm sending all my stuff in like months later, I'll get a check. So it's kind of hit or miss.
Yeah.
I don't really know what's covered and what's not when I send it in.
And so the best thing you can do is I would call your insurance company and say, what is your guidelines, policy, and procedure for the super bill?
Yeah.
How does it work? What do I have to know in advance? Do they have any booklets, or do they have a specific area in their website that they can direct you to so that they can explain? Because like a regular bill, if you have everything done, and let's just say, you know, how to get your T's and your I's dotted and crossed. If you miss one thing, that one thing you're missing is what's gonna cause that bill not to get paid. But if you don't know what that is, then you don't know how to fix it to get your bill paid. You just, as far as you're aware, well, they're not gonna pay it. So that's where knowing where to find that information on their website is important so that you can go through, and then maybe calling an advocate.
What's this? And then I can email my app, like when Dr. Erbst ordered my full exome from Vitae, it was $1,200 and insurance was like, no. So I called the insurance rep and she was like, that should be covered, except Dr. Erbst was not a provider in network with TRICARE, so that was out of pocket. But when Mayo did the Invitae test and billed it through TRICARE, they were in network with TRICARE, so it was all covered.
Mhm.
So some stuff I know I'm just gonna not get paid, but it is nice to know how to submit the super bill, because I didn't even know what that was a year ago.
So one of the other things too, that sometimes will cause claims not to be paid is you might have 4 or 5 different diagnoses. Some insurance companies don't like that primary diagnosis the doctor put in the primary position. You can always ask your doctor to reevaluate. You can call your insurance and say, can you look at these diagnoses, and ask them, is the primary diagnosis covered? And if they say it's covered, but not in a primary position, you ask them that. They have to tell you that. And if they say not as a primary diagnosis, then you go back to your doctor and say, can you reevaluate these in the order in which they are and shuffle them around?
Yeah, because my PCM, when we did my in-home health referral, what you would think the codes would be, or the diagnosis for in-home health, what I was going for, he actually billed completely separate. He's like, we need to be billing under lymphedema, and then my insurance got involved, and they were like, we need this code. So it's basically 3 codes, like you said, you look up the codes, because I've got about 35, 40 different codes to choose from. So we plugged in what insurance would cover before we submit it. So
Yes.
you're right, you have to literally be your own.
So you have to be your own advocate. Most people don't know that. Because a
You
lot
can
of
play with
times,
those diagnosis codes.
for example, if you go in and you have, most people do this, they go in and they set themselves up to get their annual preventative done. So you go in and you get your annual, and then by chance you happen to have a cough or you have a rash. And so in the process of you having your annual visit, you are now talking about a medical issue that's current, an acute, they'll call it an acute condition. So now you went from just having an annual visit to you are now having an EM visit too. So while you're thinking in your mind, I don't have a copay, this is covered at 100% because it's an annual. Not anymore. Your annual is covered at 100%. But now that you're talking about a cough or a rash, now the doctor is allowed, and it's legal, he's allowed to charge for an EM visit because he might give you a prescription, or he might treat whatever condition you're having right then and there that you're talking about. And so now your insurance company is going to get billed your preventative and your EM visit, and you're going to, if your insurance does this, and you're going to get charged a copay, and you're going, why am I getting charged a copay? Because you asked. So know that if you don't want to intermix the two, only talk about your screenings and your preventative stuff. Don't talk about any ailments that you have that are current. If you do, the doctor can charge an EM visit, and you will now have a copay or whatever responsibility your insurance says you have.
Bill. Chrissy cough, Bill. Rash. Oh.
So that same thing, I think it goes for like, so you have your vaccinations that are covered. Most people don't realize this, but your shinglet shots, if you get a shinglet shot, is covered, but not in the doctor's office. You need to go to the pharmacy. And
Yeah, you
that
have to
done.
go to
A lot of times
CVS or wherever.
Yes, they can, but guess what? You're now gonna be responsible. If you have Medicare and you go and have that shinglet shot, you actually have to check with your insurance companies too. Some plans, it depends on the plans. You have it in the doctor's office, even though they have the medicine. If your plan says no, it's covered, and they'll say it's covered, but if it's not covered in the doctor's office, you gotta go to the pharmacy. So.
Jacksonville Blue Shield is unable to reach agreement with 7 hospital systems.
Oh, yeah, we heard about that.
What is
The
it?
Florida
So,
Blue
did you catch that?
not making an agreement with US or something recently?
Oh, that's recent, yeah, I would think UF. That's a question from earlier,
US
guys.
is, what was the question?
It says in Jacksonville, Blue Shield is unable to reach an agreement with several hospital systems.
I think UF Baptist, typically what happens, I worked at another company before. And I helped with some of the contracting. So basically what happens when insurance companies and providers, major companies, when they have a contract, right? And so if you have a contract, and that contract, you have a fee schedule, right? That means that's an agreement. So if so it's called a rack rate. So it means across the board, every insurance company gets charged the same thing. So let's take an EM visit, just a regular office visit. Say they charge $500, that's called a rack rate. Every single insurance company gets charged that same thing. But if United or Blue Cross or Cigna have a contract in place with you and they say, you're charging $500, but we're gonna agree to only pay $350. So then the difference between the $350 and the $500, that's called a contractual write-off. We write off that difference. Now, that $350, typically the insurance company says, I'll pay 80% of that, and then 20% goes to co-insurance. So then they pay that. So if your contract has been in place for, say, 10 years, and you just keep renewing it and renewing it and renewing it, when the economy like it is now is changing and things are more expensive. So your people that you work, your doctors, your nurses, your staff at the front desk, your myself, claims processor that looks at the coding and the claims, and we're trying to grab the money. We get our cost of living raises, but our contractual agreement stays the same. Guess what? You're losing money. And so you go back to the table and you say, Blue Cross, Aetna, Cigna, whoever, that's time for that contractual renewal. And you say, we want a pay raise. We haven't had any change in the fee schedule for 10 years. It's time to renegotiate. And they say, nope. And then they do this and they're wavering back and forth and nobody comes up to an agreement. Well, then you have a cutoff date where this is the day we both have to agree and sign this, and then the contract is renewed. Or they say, we're not budging, no one's budging. And that the following day, contract is null and void, there's no longer a contract. And so what usually happens is we call it a cool off period. So then everybody just goes in their corner, and then the providers usually will come up with a new contract. They'll look at the old one, they'll pull out some stuff and say, okay, we want to still do all this, but we have to come up with something new. And then they go back to the table and they say, we want to present you a brand new contract, because the contract they had that they were trying to renegotiate, they didn't come to a conclusion. So now we're going to create a whole new contract. So if you see a contract or a provider that their contract is up and broken, give them a couple months. They're going to come back to the table. They're going to go back for a negotiation for a new contract. But it usually on average takes minimum of 3 to 6 to 1 year for that to fully take place.
Okay. Just gonna keep it.
Yeah.
I wondered about that too, because I know a lot of people were being affected by the Blue Cross particular one of recent.
Yeah.
I've got more. UF Baptist, it will leave only HCA and Ascension hospitals for BCBS patients. The CEO are making money and their salaries are public and it's in the millions, disheartening. Yeah, I think they're having issues where Zebra's having issues in this area with different,
Yeah, not being able to go.
not being able to go to one hospital for all of our care.
Well, the sad thing is that with different companies' contracts being in the negotiation period and they don't renew,
Mhm.
it's already hard to get into a doctor.
Yeah,
And so then you take away those companies that were contracted because you can't come up with an agreement. Now, all of a sudden, now you try getting into a doctor that's in in your contract, in your directory. It's instead of getting in there in a month, it's gonna take you 2 or 3 months. And that's not a good thing. I had somebody that I know say, someone else that she knew needed to go and have a regular psychiatric visit. And they told her that she couldn't get in for 1 year. So it's gonna take her 1 year to get in to see an in-network mental health.
Right.
That's crazy.
So many doctors.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have issues with geneticists getting in, it takes like a year.
Even though we just moved from the Gulf Coast because of my lack of, there's just nothing over in Dustin.
Mhm.
It was, I think, a year, just a general gynecologist, a year wait. That's not if you have endometriosis or issues going on at the same, you need birth control, there's a wait, like a year.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So we're driving like hours away for care, or we're not getting it.
And that's why you moved here.
Hopefully there'd be more of a buffet of providers.
I was gonna say, so, I don't like it, but me, I'm not one to go to the doctor very often. I mean, I really have to be sick, but if I call my doctor and they say, I can get you in next week, and I'm like, but I'm sick now. And
Yeah.
by the time next week comes, I'll either be worse or I'll be half over, and what's the point? So in all honesty, if they're in my insurance, I'll go to the urgent care, and a lot of these
Yeah.
urgent cares, you can call them and say, how busy are you?
Yep.
And they'll say, we don't have anybody right now, we can put you on an appointment for an hour. Every time I've ever done that, and I'm not deterring anybody from going to primary care, because that doctor knows you very well. But if it's something that I can just go there, I'll just go in and I can get in and out of there within, start to finish 45 minutes.
Yep.
And so I kind of am lazy that way. I'm like, I'll go for my primary care and all that there, all my annual visits. But if I have something that comes up really quick, I can't get in a day, I'll go to the urgent cares.
I honestly, so I do 30+ appointments a month between all the stuff. And what I started doing, because the insurance I have allows it, I make double appointments. So like moving here, I'm like, I need a new OT, but I've heard this one's good and this one's good and these two accept my insurance. So I'll double book it, because sometimes they have a longer wait and you can get on cancellation list. And to me, it's better to have 2 doctors waiting for me instead of just one. But that's just me, because my case is complicated and it's hard to find specialist doctors, just any kind of doctors or therapists to treat the stuff. So sometimes I double up. I just make phone calls and I get on schedules, because all the schedules are so backlogged, it seems like.
Yeah.
And I think doing the wait list thing is super. I'm always do that. I'm like, put me on your
Oh, yeah.
cancellation list 100% every time.
And if you call them a couple times, then
And
you're
you're really nice to them too. They'll remember you.
Yeah, if you call them and you're like, hey, I'm just checking and seeing if you have any openings, I really need to get in. Thanks.
You see them
Keep
in
me in
person
mind.
too, you just bring little chocolates or you pay attention. Like, I know that my caseworker for insurance also has lymphedema, so how's your lymphedema doing? They tend to remember you. Customer service, it's all a game. That's what I've discovered. I've done this my whole life. I've been in and out of doctors, and it's literally a game.
Yeah, well, I know I don't generally talk to patients on a regular basis. Usually it has to be an escalated case for me to have that direct, communication where someone's given them my number, or I call them directly, and then I handle that account. And usually by the time it gets to me, the patient's probably pretty upset. And so then I let them vent and I say, okay, I'm your advocate. I'm not your enemy. Tell me what's going on and I will look into this and I will do everything I can to resolve it. And I'll tell you the truth. If I look at the whole thing and I'm like, no matter what we do, it's not going to get paid, I'm going to let you know that, but if I can fight for it and do it, then I will. I absolutely will.
So we have to realize you're human too.
Yeah, and my thing is, I didn't get in this field because of any other reason. It's just, I like people, and I want to help people. I like to serve. When I say serve, so if I have a greater understanding of something and I can help you do that, that makes my day, because you're not coming to the doctor because you're well. You're coming to the doctor because you're sick. So do you want to deal with your medical bills in addition to your medical health? A lot of times you don't even know where to go. And so you need the advocates. You need the people to have your back, to understand and explain it to you, because you're not, especially when you're sick. Are you really gonna know everything that's happening? You're not. And so that's where I love doing this job. You know, this is like the best way. I'm not a nurse, I'm not a doctor, but I help those doctors get those claims paid, and I help patients understand their bill and get their bill paid when the insurance company isn't processing it correctly. I look at it and I say, well, it's the diagnosis. Well, it's this. This is the policy. We need to educate our doctors. We need to educate our patients. And that's where I come in and I try to help do that.
I just love you. I wish you were my insurance rep. She's so positive.
We have one person asking about, I don't know what this is, Meridian using Aetna network?
Meridian, it's our Meritain. Yes,
It's spelled different,
it's-
yeah.
I always say Meritain, but some people call it Meridian. It's an umbrella. So,
Oh,
so there's Meritain, it was Coventry, and, what is there? There's a couple
oh,
different
yeah,
names.
I remember.
It's an umbrella, we call it umbrella, because they use the fee schedule and basically the contract. Same thing with United Health, there's Golden Rule, there's WellCare, there's AARP, there's UMR, All Savers, all of those names are all United Healthcare.
Mhm.
So Blue Cross, we have My Blue, Blue Options, Blue Choice, Blue HMO. There's
Yeah,
just
there's
a
a
whole
bunch
gamut
of
of
them.
different ones. So what I really like about Blue is there's one address. No matter
Mhm.
what insurance plan you have, everything goes to the same address, and then they delegate it out to the right areas. Whereas, United Healthcare can have different addresses, Aetna can have different addresses, Cigna has different addresses. Cigna is like, they have so many different names. It'll say Cigna, but it'll be Seafair or all these different names. Seafair is usually the ones for people that are, that work it out to sea.
Oh,
So
okay,
for
yeah.
example, you have your like, the fishers that do fishing or crabbing, you know how you see those movies, so you have the different fishermen.
Yeah,
Well, whoever they're with, they have insurance through them. So while they're out to sea, they have coverage. When they're not working and they're not out to sea, unless they continue paying premiums separately to keep
okay.
that going, they don't have insurance anymore. So it's one of those, one month they have coverage, the next month they don't. It depends on how often or how long they're out to sea. So we have to really pay attention to, are you covered during this period? Or are you off coverage at this period? So we really have to, as a provider, pay attention to dates of effective and term dates of coverage. Marketplace is
Wow.
the same way. So when I say marketplace, that's the Obamacare, when Obama came out, and then they said you can go to the marketplace and purchase your own insurance. So if you're self-employed or you're in between jobs and you just want temporary coverage, you can go purchase, and it has all these things. You answer the question, how much coverage do you want? What do you want included? So it's like an a la carte, and you check the boxes and then you get your coverage, and then you pay your premiums. They give you a grace period, usually of 3 months. You haven't paid those premiums in 3 months. Basically, if you go to the doctor, technically you're supposed to have coverage, but they got to give you a grace period of 3 months. So we can bill your insurance company. They literally can hold us off for 3 months, sometimes 4 months, and not pay us until the 5th month for your visit. So we have to go on the website and keep checking. Did they pay the premiums? Did they pay the premiums for at least 4
wow.
months? And then we say, okay, you paid. Will you pay us now?
I think that's about it.
Let's see if I have any questions. Just to make sure get extra medical codes is an issue. Okay, I don't have any more questions.
And Jamie also said that the reimbursement for OT and PT for the providers is getting lower, and a lot of people are going to private
Mhm.
pay because of the way the insurance doesn't cover as much.
Yeah, I know someone who, he's a doctor now, and he was primary care, and he opened up his own business in South Carolina. And, I was like, oh my gosh, how are you gonna do that? You don't have any, he wasn't contracting with any insurance companies. And he is absolutely doing fantastic. He's like, people come, they don't mind because there's a set rate, they know how much the set rate is. And his business is and was building up so much that they actually hired a pediatric doctor to come in and serve with him. So I was amazed because I wasn't sure how that was gonna work, but things are growing and his business is skyrocketing, and people like not having that middleman. And again, this is my personal opinion, has nothing to do with anything, but I'm thinking, we pay so much in our premiums, just the premiums alone. And then we still have a deductible, and we still have co-insurance, and we still have co-pay. And I'm like, one of the reasons why I don't go to the doctor is if I'm not sick, I'm not just, I have to really be sick. But I'm thinking, why don't they just let us have our own medical bank account? If I took my premiums that I pay regularly, and because I'm not very sickly, I realize some people are, but if I took all that money and I stuck it in my health savings account that was specially designed for me to have, then by the time, if I saved up a whole year and I didn't go to the doctor, and I saved up the next year, you realize that can really, really grow.
That would add up, yeah.
I have insurance that covers 100% of almost everything with TRICARE. And I got so sick, it wasn't getting help, that I chose, and I still do to this day, I paid out of pocket for my functional PCM, who also prescribes and orders tests that my insurance covered. It is legit a plan that I chose for the month, gives me access to them. It's like, it's worth it because I skip all of the other, I don't have time to waste with a bunch of like waiting for appointments, or I need this test or this, you call your doctor and it takes like days to get back.
Yeah.
Immediately in the portal. It's literally what they're doing. And he was a primary doctor who was tired of seeing his patients for 15 minutes. Opened his own practice. They do blood there and everything. Like it's an doctor's office, but it combines Eastern and Western, and we all pay cash and we get excellent service. It's like VIP hospital service.
Yeah. Now see, I find sometimes that, when you're dealing with insurance and those insurance companies, they say, these are the locations in which you can go for, like, say you need to get an MRI or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you go there and you're like, okay, my doctor ordered this, I need to go. And they're like, oh, I can't get you in for a month, or, because so there is a difference too. So, freestanding. Okay, freestanding is one that is not owned by a hospital. That's called a freestanding imaging center. Their fee schedules with your insurance company is cheaper. That means that your out-of-pocket is cheaper than if you go to a hospital-owned facility. If you go to a hospital-owned facility, so if you get an MRI at a hospital-owned facility, and I'm just throwing the number out there, they can provide, because your overhead is greater because of it being owned by the hospital, so they can charge, again, I'm throwing the number, $1,500 for an MRI. You go to a freestanding facility, their overhead is not as much, they're not owned by a hospital, they can charge you half, like say $700. Contractually, you're gonna have less out of pocket, because if you have a deductible or, a copay, because the freestanding is not got as big a overhead, the contractual rate is gonna be less there than at the hospital. So, and then sometimes if you're, again, if you're contracted with one and your insurance company says there, sometimes you may want to say, okay, how much is self-pay over here? But don't give your insurance, because you're obligated, if they ask you for your insurance, especially if they have a contract, they are obligated to use your insurance because they have a contract. If you don't tell them about your insurance and you just say, I'm self-pay, how much is your self-pay rate? 150. But the contract rate with your insurance company say it's 350. Well, it's not going towards your your benefits, but it's a little cheaper for you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those are things to think about, you know, again. When
see
you
medical
tell them
care
you
going
have
in that
insurance,
direction, though, where
they're
you-
obligated to bill.
we start to leave
Yeah.
reviews for providers. For me, at least, it used to be 10 years, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Doctors were, like, you had a doctor and there wasn't really a choice, right? Like I mean, it was doctors were doctors. And now I think we're learning, like, there's more choices for us. There are like imaging places we can go to that are hospitals. There are doctors we can go to that are self-pay. There's a lot of doctors out of Mayo in Jacksonville here that are self-pay now and open up their own clinics for various different things for a reason, in my opinion. I think that we're going in that direction. I would rather pay my functional PCM a couple $100s a month than to deal with 10 different doctors and 50 different co-pays to try to get to the same answer.
Yeah, well, and I'll tell you the difference. The one thing I did like about Mayo Clinic is Mayo Clinic's doctors worked only at Mayo Clinic. And so then you only had a Mayo Clinic bill,
Yeah, that is.
where that's them, right? When you have community hospitals, such as, who is the community, like UNF, Baptist, St. Vincent's, Memorial, all of those are community hospitals, which mean that doctors in the community use that hospital to do surgeries and other things, but they also do rounds. So when they ask you, and I wish that we were a little bit more, hospitals don't keep it from you, but I don't think that they actually educate the patient. So if they go by and say, Dr. So-and-so is here, and you have a little rash or something on your arm, would you like him, while you're in the hospital, would you like him to come and see that for you? And you say, sure. You now are gonna get a bill from Dr. So-and-so because he's doing rounds, and that's not part of just, it's just not, hey, they're here, they're looking, it's a separate visit. Even if he says, oh, you'll be fine, that'll heal in a few minutes. And he might have been in there for 5 minutes in your room, but he can bill now. And a lot of times patients don't realize that. So unless you really need that doctor to look at you, say no. Unless you, and then this, because a lot of times you go, I saw him for 5 minutes and he didn't do anything. He just looked at my chart and said, I'm fine. Just follow up with my regular PCP in a week. He's allowed to bill for that. And a lot of times you may not realize that as a patient, when you're thinking, no, he's here, I'm in the hospital, it's just
all
part of
just
my visit.
included,
It's
yeah.
just not, it's completely separate.
Got any more questions?
No, I think that's it, but we did have 963 viewers.
Wow, that's really good. Oh, okay, we better get going. Well, thank you so much for being here today. Jennifer, you've been amazing.
Well, I don't know that I helped anybody. I hope that I did.
Super, like, it's interesting too. It's nice to see your side of it.
Yep.
There, it's nice to see that other side on the phone that I never see, the people behind the scenes doing stuff that, you know, I tend to get angry at phone calls too. I'm gonna make that a reminder. to
You
always-
know what? We know that. We know people get upset. So we say, that's where I say, we're your advocate, really are.
Yeah,
We really do, not just because we work for a company. We really do. Most people that are in this field that I do
Mhm.
on the insurance end, their goal is to get your bill paid, not just because of the company, but I have some girls that work with me and they're like, I work for the patient. That's how they see it. Although they work for the company, they say, I work for the patient. My job is to get that patient's bill paid.
Yep.
So
I seriously
So
doubt
nice.
there's a whole group of people out there in the building community going like, let's go out and see how much money we can get out of people today. You have like little pre-meetings, right? Like let's gouge the patient.
no. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.